The Dialore's Book of Greek Myths, Part 11. Danae, Perseus, and the Gorgon. Loud was the song of the Muses about Danae, first of the line of great kings and heroes. King Danae of Libya had 50 daughters. His brother King Aegyptus had 50 sons. The 50 sons wanted to marry the 50 daughters, but they were rough and rowdy, and King Danae did not want them for his son-in-laws. He feared that they might carry off his daughters by force, so secretly he built a ship with 50 oars and fled with his daughters. The 50 princesses pulled at the oars and rowed the ship across the wide sea. They reached Argos in Greece, and when the people there saw the king standing in the prow of the gorgeous ship rowed by princesses, they were in awe. They were certain that Danae had been sent by the gods and made him their king. Danae was a good ruler, and peace and happiness reigned in Argos until one day another splendid ship arrived. And who should be on that? At the oars but King Aegyptus, 50 sons who had come in to claim their brides. Danae did not dare to oppose them and had a lavish wedding feast prepared. But secretly he gave each of his 50 daughters a dagger and ordered them to kill their husbands as soon as they were alone. 49 of the brides obeyed him, but Hypermnestra, the eldest, fell in love with Lysias, her prince, and fled with him. In vain did Danae try to find new husbands for his widowed daughters. Nobody dared to marry them. The 49 Danaids had to live without joy, and when they died and came to the underworld, we were sentenced to carry water forever in sieves, trying in vain to fill a bath and wash off their sins. When King Danae grew old, there were no heirs to his throne, and he had to send Hypermnestra and Lysias, who were living in great happiness. They became king and queen of Argos, and their son became king after them. When he died, his son Acrisius inherited the throne. Acrisius, however, had no son. He had only a beautiful golden-haired daughter whose name was Danae. But her beauty brought no joy to her father. He wanted a son and heir to his kingdom. When an oracle told him he would die by the hand of his daughter's son, he put Danae in a sealed chamber that had neither windows nor doors, only an opening in the roof. There was no suitor could see her beauty, and she would remain unwed and childless. But Echius forgot to reckon with Zeus. The thunder god spied the lonesome maiden through the opening in the roof, and in the shape of a golden shower he descended to her. No longer was Danae lonesome, for now she was the happy bride of Zeus. But when her father heard the cries of an infant from her chamber, he broke through the walls in a rage, intending to kill his grandson. When he learned that Zeus was the child's father, he did not dare to lay a hand on him. Instead, he put Danae and her son Perseus in a chest and threw them into the sea. If they drowned, Poseidon would be to blame. Zeus gently steered the chest to the shore of an island, and a fisherman who was casting his nets hauled it in. Great was his surprise when what he saw in the chest contained. When Danae had told him her story, he took her and little Perseus to him and cared for them as if they were his own, for he was a kind old man and childless. In his humble hut, Perseus grew into a fine and valiant youth, proud of being the son of Zeus and the beautiful Danae. But Danae's beauty attracted the eye of the ruthless king of the island. He wanted her for his queen. In vain did Danae turn him away. She was the bride of Zeus, and swore that she would marry no other. The king pursued her and would have carried her off by force if Perseus had not protected her. The scheming king decided to get rid of Perseus and let it be known that he was going to marry a princess from a neighboring island. As was the custom, all the men in the kingdom brought him gifts. Only Perseus was so poor they had nothing to give, so he offered his services to the king instead. This is just what the king had expected. "Slay the monster Medusa and bring me her head," he said. "No man has ever set out to kill Medusa and come back." The king was sure now that he was forever rid of Perseus. Medusa was one of 3 horrible Gorgon sisters, so gruesome that all living creatures turned to stone at the sight of her. They lived on an island far out to sea, but nobody knew just where. Perseus bid his mother goodbye and set out in search for Medusa. He went over land and over sea asking his way, but nobody could tell him where the Gorgons lived. As he stood at the crossroads wondering which way to go, Athena and Hermes suddenly appeared. Zeus had sent them to help him. They could tell him the way to the island of the Gorgons, but he needed more help than that. Athena, excuse me, Athena lent him her shield, polished as brightly as a mirror. Hermes lent him his sword, which is so sharp that it cut through the hardest metal. He also needed 3 magic things owned by the nymphs of the north, they told him. But even the gods did not know where these nymphs lived. That was a secret closely guarded by the 3 Grey sisters, and they would never willingly reveal it, for they were the Gorgon sisters. But Hermes offered to take Perseus under his arm, so he went far into the air and flew off, swifter than the wind. They flew far, far to the west. At last they came to a land where the sun never shone, and everything was as gray as dusk. There sat the 3 Grey sisters. Their hair was gray, their faces were gray, and they only had 1 gray eye between them, which they took turns looking through. As one of the sisters was handing the eye to another, Perseus sprang forward and snatched it. "Now I have your eye," cried Perseus. "You will never get it back unless you tell me the way to the nymphs of the north." The 3 Grey sisters wailed and begged for their eye, but Perseus would not give it back, so they had to tell him the way. Again, Hermes took him under the arm and flew with him far, far to the north, beyond the north wind, where the sun never set. The nymphs of the north received them kindly, and when they heard why Perseus had come, they gladly lent him the 3 things he needed: a pair of winged sandals to carry him through the air, a cap to make him invisible, and a magic bag to hold whatever he put in it. "Now he is ready to slay the Medusa," said Hermes. He showed him the way and wished him good luck. Wearing the winged sandals, Perseus flew far to the west. When he came to the island of the Gorgons, he did not look down. He looked instead into Athena's polished shield and shuddered at the sight of what he saw. Mirrored there in the 3 Gorgon sisters was lying on the shore, fast asleep. Long yellow fangs hung from their grinning mouths. On their heads grew withering snakes instead of hair, and their necks was covered with scales of bronze. Among them stood the strangest stone. It was easy to see that they had once been men. Looking in the mirroring shield, Perseus swooped down and with a deft stroke cut off the Medusa's head. Out from the monster's severed head sprung a beautiful winged horse, the Pegasus. He neighed, and the other 2 Gorgons awoke. Quickly, Perseus threw Medusa's head into the magic bag and swung himself into the air. Wailing, the 2 Gorgon sisters took the air in heavy wings in groping pursuit. They could not find him, for he had put on the magic cap of invisibility. On his way home, as he flew over the coast of Ethiopia, Perseus saw below a beautiful maiden changed to a rock by the sea. She was so pale that at first he thought she was a marble statue, but then he saw tears trickling from her eyes. He swooped down and tore at her chains, trying to break them. "Please," she said, "or you too will be devoured by the sea monster." But Perseus refused to leave and she told her sad story. Her name was Andromeda, and she was the king of Cepheus and queen Cassiopeia. Her mother was very vain and boasted unwisely that she was lovelier than the Nereids. Poseidon could not tolerate having a mortal compared to the goddesses of the sea, and as punishment, he sent a sea monster to ravage the kingdom of Ethiopia. To appease the anger god and save his kingdom, her father had to sacrifice his only daughter to the monster, and there she stood, chained to the cliff, waiting to be devoured. She had begged the prince to whom she was engaged to save her, but he had fled in fear. "I shall save you, and you shall be mine," said Perseus. As he spoke, a horrible sea monster came from the sea, its huge mouth opened wide to swallow Andromeda. But Perseus sprang into the air, dived at the monster, and drove his sword deep into its throat. The monster bellowed, lashed its tail wildly, and rolled over on its back. It sank in the sea, was tinted red by its blood. Ever since, that stretch of water has been called the Red Sea. No sooner was the monster dead than Andromeda's cowardly suitor returned with many warriors to claim her for his bride. Now he was bold and menacing, and King Cepheus did not dare to oppose him. "Andromeda, shield your eyes," cried Perseus, and with that he lifted the head of the Medusa out of the bag. The suitor and his men stared in horror, and whoops, they were changed into stone. Unfortunately, the king and the queen had also looked at the Gorgon's head, and they too had been turned into stone. But since the son of Zeus was going to marry their daughter, the gods took pity on them and hung Cepheus and Cassiopeia in the sky as constellations. Perseus lifted Andromeda into his arms and flew homewards. But since he arrived at the fisherman's hut, he learned that Danae and the fisherman had gone into hiding. As soon as the king of the island had gotten rid of Perseus, he had tried to carry Danae off. To save her, the kind old fisherman had fled with her. When Perseus heard that he had made straight for the king's palace, "Here is the head you wanted," he shouted, and pulled Medusa's head out of the bag. Startled, the king and his men looked up, and there they sat, turned into statues of stones, some of them with their mouths still opened in astonishment. The people of the island rejoiced at being rid of the tyrant, and as soon as the fisherman and Danae came out of hiding, they made the fisherman their new king. He gave Perseus and Andromeda the grandest of wedding feasts, and everybody was happy. Perseus did not keep the Gorgon's head. It was much too dangerous for a mortal to own. He gave it to Athena when he returned the shield and the other magic objects he had borrowed. Perseus thought that his grandfather, Acterius, would be happy to see him now, that he was a hero, and he set sail for Argos with Danae and Andromeda. But when the old king learned that his grandson was approaching, he fled, for he still remembered the oracle's warning, and so Perseus became king of Argos. Perseus ruled wisely and well, his mother and his wife always at his side. Since he was a great athlete, he also took part in games all over Greece. One day, a sudden gust of wind changed the course of a discus he had thrown, and it killed an old man who was watching the games. Who should that old man be but Acterius, his grandfather? Thus the words of the oracle came true. After that, Perseus no longer wanted to live in his grandfather's city, Argos, so he founded instead the splendid, fortified city of Messina, not far away, and many great kings and heroes were descended from him and Andromeda. When at last Perseus and Andromeda died, Zeus put them too in the sky as constellations. Part 11.